has popped up to the top right hand corner of the screen to say that the meeting is being recorded, and it will be recorded throughout the entire session. So I am going to hand over to Hamish there. Hamish, if you want to unmute your microphone for me.
Okay, everybody hear me?
And I'd like to say, yes, I can hear you nicely there. And hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Jane. It's nice to know we've got somebody at the helm a lot more competent with these kind of things than me, just in case everything goes wrong. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and more than anything, thank you very much for having me come along. I've actually had a fun morning trying to get here, so I'm presenting to you from my bedroom because due to train delays and not being able to actually get into the office this morning. Today...
Sorry, Hamish, can I just interrupt you there? We've got quite a few people saying that you're very quiet. They're not able to hear you very well. So if you go to the microphone icon at the top of your screen and click the drop down arrow to the right, you should be able to adjust your microphone volume.
Is that better? Is that better there?
That is for me. I think everybody's responding there. Yep, lovely. Okay, sorry to interrupt you there, Hamish. I shall mute my microphone again.
It's up to the maximum volume now, so yeah, right. Okay, well, I'll just get straight into it. Today is going to be kind of a presentation of two parts. The first one is just a PowerPoint kind of presentation, where I want to talk to you a bit about where this idea of the Learners Toolkit came from, and what we're doing to try and bring it about at the University of Aberdeen. After that, I'm going to go into a bit of a live demo of our pilot site, show you some of the design ideas and concepts we're playing with, the kind of resources we're wanting to put in there, and the way we're wanting to construct the resources. So without further ado, I'll just dive into the beginnings. So to start with, I'm going to speak about my particular perspective. Now, I'm an assistive technologist. I don't know if there are any assistive technologists out there. You can raise your hands if there are. From what I gather with this group, from what I've read on their website, we do a very similar sort of job in assistive technology, but very specifically we focus on staff and students with disabilities, specific learning differences, that kind of thing, and basically giving people both access to their studies and helping them get the most out of their studies. But the very bottom line, we're all about looking into technology and how technology can be used to maximum impact to help people in their studies. Now, to speak a little bit about where I'm coming from and where this idea of the Learners Toolkit came from an assistive technology point of view. I'm going to speak through something that might start to sound a bit familiar to a lot of you, a similar sort of scenario. So if I start off with a student, and the students come to me in first year, they've been referred from wherever, and that student has a specific learning difference, something like that, a similar processing issue. Now, they'll report quite often having some kind of overload issues when they're in lectures. Now, by overload, I mean they're having to listen to a lecture, participate in that lecture. At the same time, they're supposed to be making intelligible notes, notes that are meaningful later on, notes that can help them in an efficient way to have an effective write-up at the end. And those notes and that learning experience fits with some kind of a long-term strategy. Now, if you're, say, dyslexic, that can be a difficult task because most of your processing will be taken up with simply listening and understanding what the person's saying, and if you add on top of that having to read lecture slides and write those notes and all of that kind of thing, so many students end up just reporting that they fail to do any of those things, and lectures become cease to be an effective learning experience for many people. Now, I'm using this example to show the kind of technology that we would employ in this sort of situation. So, what we used to do when I first started back in the day as an assistive technologist, that should have been 7 years ago, I started at Robert Gordon University. And what somebody would get in that situation from an assistive technologist would be a dictaphone, plain old-fashioned dictaphone. There were some mini discs. Mini disc players used to be used before digital dictaphones came along. Now that could capture the audio, the person can make their notes, and recording filled any gaps in their notes. Now this solution was quite useful in so many ways because it was easy to teach. It's a dictaphone. It had a play and a stop and a record button. And it was very easy to choose because for somebody who had difficulty in their lectures, it was kind of one of the only solutions there really was out there. There are other bits and pieces, but this was the mainstream solution that 99% of the time a student got recommended if they needed support and help in their lectures. But this had some downsides. The downsides came along that in many ways it was just delaying the problem. What had happened is somebody would record their lecture, they would go away, and then they would have to listen back to it and fill in the notes later. And the process of processing that audio was just so clunky and so difficult that students ended up just with maybe 50 hours worth of lecture recordings at the end of the term, which they hadn't processed, they hadn't done anything with. It was just an inefficient way of doing it. But that's what's available, and that's what they did. I'm going to pause for a second because on my screen I haven't got my notes up for the individual slides. So I'm going to go in and try and see if I can find that quickly. There's the right button. Oh, that's not. Right. Okay, I've got my notes again. Okay, so in this typical situation, a student would get a dictaphone. Now let's fast forward to today. We started getting new tools coming along. Now these new tools are all great. Some of these you might recognize. All of them you might recognize. So LiveScribe pens. Many people might have encountered LiveScribe pens. It's basically a dictaphone that's been sellotaped to a pen in a way, but it goes a bit further that what the person writes is synchronized with what's recorded at the same time. So rather than having this detachment of having a dictaphone audio recording and something you've written on a different bit of paper, it combines the two. Move forward a bit quicker. Audio Note Taker is an amazing piece of software that synchronizes audio with typed notes, with pictures, images, PowerPoint slides. There are many things. I could give an entire lecture or webinar on what Audio Note Taker could do with somebody. But fast forwarding, note-taking software started coming along. You might recognize OneNote. Evernote certainly is very popular. Smartphones give all sorts of abilities for note-taking support, both in audio, in taking pictures, videos, that kind of thing. And there's apps like Google Keep that help people organize those notes. Camtasia Relay is something we use at Aberdeen University. It allows lecturers to record the lecture and then punt that out to the students after the fact, so they've got that backup. And so on and so on, the technology just keeps building. Now it's a great time to be a technology enthusiast at the moment. I don't think as an assistive technologist I've ever been more spoilt for technology and solutions to give to somebody, and all of these ones I've just presented are now available, whereas in the past a student could just get offered a dictaphone and that was about it. So yes, it's a good time to be a technology enthusiast, but quite possibly it's a bad time to try and support people in using these kind of things. So the kind of challenges we have in assistive technology point of view, and see if you recognize some of these in how you want to teach and you teach in everyday situations. So we have more tools to choose from, and that more tools to choose from is great, as I've said, but it gets harder and harder to be able to match somebody's needs to those tools. So often you'll hear people saying, oh well, I've tried 5 different apps to do X task or whatever, and really they probably wasted a lot of that time in trying all of those apps, because in the olden days maybe they just had one thing to choose from and they just got on with it. The same point of view from an assistive technology thing, we'll be trying to get somebody to find a certain tool, a certain piece of software that suited them, and it's very hard to match it exactly because the choice is spoiling us in a way. We also have a greater diversity of needs. Now, specifically in assistive technology, this can mean a greater diversity of needs from specific learning differences, that kind of thing, because there are so many different kinds of issues known about now. People are more confident in coming forward with those issues. More people with any kind of impairments or difficulties with their learning are actually getting into university, which is a great thing, a very great thing. but it increases the diversity of the people we need to support. Now, from a non-assistive technology point of view, this is also true for everyday students. There's a greater diversity of what people want to do with technology. There's a greater diversity of what can be achieved with that technology. So we've got more technology going on, but there's so much more for that technology to do as well. So there's two levels of complexity increase in that set. Now, I was loath to put this digitally literate thing here, but students are definitely more technologically aware, let us say. Now, there's an old cliche where you speak to my colleagues an awful lot about, and it's this idea that Facebook literacy is not digital literacy in an academic sense. Now, again, I'm sure many of you will recognise that point of view. I've heard arguments before saying, why do we need to teach students how to use technology? Why do you need to teach your students anything? Because they already know how to use computers. They've been using computers since they were young. But just because you know how to use a pen or use Microsoft Word or anything like that doesn't mean you know how to write an essay. Just because you know what a calendar is doesn't mean you know how to effectively plan your time in a university situation. And it's the same with all technology. It's an advantage that students can use the technology, and more students are able to absorb what you're teaching them faster. But that doesn't mean they automatically know how to use it well. That kind of teaching still needs to happen if you want people to take advantage of what's there. And I've found as well that the nature of our training, like take back to the dictaphone. The dictaphone was an easy thing to train, as I said. And you know, there were limited strategies that can go with that. But how we teach people is getting harder and harder because there, as we said, there are more things to teach and more needs to teach to. But students also have less time to be taught this. It may just be, from my perspective, but I do see first-year students every year coming along. Every year they seem more harassed with more classes to go to, more timetables to plan, more stresses, more strains. Now, this may just be the same every year, and it's always been that stressful. But the point is, how we teach used to be very much a one-to-one kind of thing. Somebody would come along for an hour. But we're reaching less and less students through that. More and more students aren't turning up to lessons because they say that they're too busy, all of that kind of thing. Even down to worksheets and things like that. Presenting worksheets, presenting workshops, in the traditional sense of teaching, we're getting less and less engagement. Which leads to the final challenge from an assistive technology point of view, engagement. Getting students to engage with anything that you produce is very, very hard. Now, I don't need to go into that because I'm fairly sure everybody here is aware of that and has discussed that on many occasions. Now, to move on from assistive technology, I'm imagining that that picture I described is quite familiar to a lot of people. Certainly from the point of view of, well, take the dictaphone idea. That's just one example of one sort of support we provide. Mind mapping's another one. It used to be just maybe one or two mind mapping options out there. Now there's a myriad of them. Everything's starting to expand, but that's true of every kind of technology. So I'm trying to get across in this graph. The diversity of technology available is growing exponentially and has been growing exponentially. Now the diversity of the user needs, both in terms of how they need to be taught, as well as what they want to do with the technology that's available, their awareness of what they can do with technology and therefore their demand, that's going up as well. And I've certainly found within my service that we've struggled to keep the support, we've struggled to have the support keep up with these two things. There's just more and more technology out there. Every time you write a worksheet for one thing, there's an entirely new technology pops up and you need to rewrite your workshop altogether, rewrite your worksheet altogether. And it's a continuing problem that I think is true across the board with any kind of service that tries to support students through the use of technology. Should we surrender? That's always the question, and it's very tempting. But the big challenge that we came out with from both this assistive technology and when I started speaking to other departments within the university, specifically the training and documentation team, which is kind of our sister branch within IT services. The question keeps coming up is how do we effectively support our learners to take advantage of the vast array of technology available to them in the context of their studies and in their lives in general. Now, the Learners Toolkit is what we came up with. So the idea started within an assistive technology thing. When we talked to other departments, we discovered everybody has exactly the same sort of problem. So, the Learners Toolkit, which is the subject of this. We had a number of discussions within the university, certainly within IT services, about how we can approach these kind of problems with both engagements, with keeping up with the pace of technology, helping students get value out of what they're, the technology in their pockets, all of that kind of thing. And the primary thing we came up with is we need some kind of system, some kind of resource that can move fast in terms of getting resources in there, can put the person at the centre of the teaching and the resources, so it's all about the individual at the end of the line. And the Learners Toolkit's what we came up with. And we came up with these kind of general rules. So, I mentioned the idea that we wanted something that was a central resource for these kind of things. Now, digital hub, it's a good kind of buzzword or term for this kind of thing. But what we wanted is some kind of area that we could feed in whatever resources we come up with in whatever way we come up with them, but an area that people get into the habit of using and people know as the go-to place for this kind of learning, for these kind of support tools. We want the resources that are in this hub to be arranged by skill level. Now, very often I've found, certainly in my experience, technology support is kind of a one-level thing. You go along, you want to use Word, and somebody will give you a worksheet or something like that, or a workbook to go through. Now, very often with my students, when I'm teaching them, I'll start off by going, right now I'm going to show you all these features and teach you them, and they sort of go, oh, you know, I can figure that out myself. Can you cut to the chase? Can you give me the shortened version, the quick version? So the idea of having resources available so that anybody who wants to engage quickly and get the very bare essentials of what they need, because they can figure the rest out, that's important. Just as important as also having a resource for somebody who needs their hand held, so to speak, and going through everything step by step. That's just as important. So we were intent that our resources were arranged from a skill level point of view so people could easily access the things they wanted. We're also very certain that we need to teach the real world tasks, not function. Now by that I mean it's very easy to set up lots of resources saying here's where you go to learn how to use Microsoft Word, or from assistive technology point of view it's very easy saying here's a how-to for a live scribe pen. Now I've found certainly the idea of a how-to for a live scribe pen isn't terribly useful for an awful lot of my students. They don't need the step-by-step as much as they need you to explain to them how to use the pen as a strategy, how to use the pen in their everyday academic studies, and how it can work for them and how it can be an advantage to them. So we've certainly within my team, we've been changing over the years from having a very much teaching to the technology point of view to teaching to task. We don't say here's how to use mind mapping, we say here's how to use mind mapping to write an essay. We take it from the person's point of view, and they don't come to you and say I need support with this technology most of the time. They'll say I need support with writing essays, I want support with planning my time, I need support with communicating. That kind of real world, sort of almost natural language kind of questioning. We're also very intent about it being cross-departmental, whatever it is that we do create. Now, this means a number of different things. First of all, take your average first-year student. Again, I don't know about other universities, and I don't necessarily want to criticise just my own university, but it's a challenge for us to be able to have a student come into the university in first year and have a number of different support needs, whether it's help with accommodation, help with their study skills, help with time management, all the way through to simply help with feeding themselves, all of the million different things that somebody probably leaving home for the first time, coming to a university, being dumped out of secondary education straight into higher education, where people say, you're on your own now, there's the library, here are lectures, you figure it out. There are so many different resources available to help them, but they're in so many different places, and they're in so many different websites, everything from websites through to physical location, that kind of thing. It's dizzying for a first-year student especially. International students as well have exactly the same problems. Certainly from a disability point of view, there are 3 different departments specifically for students with a disability or learning difference. One, which is us, which is in IT services. There's a dyslexia specialist in the student learning service, which is over in another department. And there's the disability team who work within student support services. And there's reasons for that, and it works, but it adds to a student's stress of having 3 different departments to tick off that they need to contact and speak to. So we're very intent that this resource wasn't or isn't put forward as an IT services resource or as one resource or another. We're wanting to encourage departments to see what we're doing with this and then put their stuff into here, because from a student's point of view, they want resources or information presented to them in as singular a way as possible. And the last one that's really useful to mention is seeking value. Anything we do, we need to get maximum value for. Now that's not just about saving money. There's a very great difference between that and anything else, but if we're going to write a worksheet, we want it to have maximum impact. If we're going to go to the trouble of researching a new piece of technology, we want to make sure that it's going to be useful to the students. This value thing also works from the university point of view, because if we can do this right, then whatever resources the university produces in terms of infrastructure, that kind of thing, we're supporting. There's no point spending many tens of thousands of pounds on Microsoft licensing for Office, for example, if we're not effectively supporting students to make the very most out of those tools that are there. I often think that the training, and I believe that's probably covering people like yourselves out there, I think that kind of thing often gets thought of second after they've thought of the tools to provide and the infrastructure to put in. But it should be the core, and it should be the centre of any kind of policy and strategy for enabling students to use technology that's out there. There's one more thing actually I forgot that was to do with the cross-departmental, and I'll show you this when we actually get into the Learners Toolkit. We're also keen that resources were written not just by one department. So not just having resources from different departments all in the same place, but for example, when I'm teaching somebody mind mapping, I don't just teach them the functionality of the mind mapping, I have to speak about essay writing or organisation time management strategies, all of those kind of things. So what we started doing is some of these resources, we're working with the likes of the Student Learning Service, which is our academic study skills team, to co-write these kind of things. If you're going to write a document about Microsoft or create a resource about using Word for long documents, theses and that kind of thing, it would be great to speak again to the academic people so that we could have a resource that combines information from both sides, so it's most useful to everybody. So I'm going to move on to the more actual Learners Toolkit itself. Now this was a screen grab, so it's not terribly high resolution there, I'm afraid. What we started off with the Learners Toolkit was the idea of having 3 people. Now, yes, these are generalizations, but this is our attempt at breaking down how the resources are presented in a way that we hope will be recognizable to students. Now, they're not necessarily done in terms of technology ability. It's not saying that Tom's rubbish at technology, but Zack's amazing necessarily. It's about how far along the road of using technology as part of your studies and how experienced you are it is. So in the Tom sort of section, where you've put all of the things to do with getting connected to the Wi-Fi, that kind of idea. How to use Microsoft Word, the basics, how to get Microsoft Word on the computer you're using, that kind of idea. And then up through the different levels, and I'll show you the kind of content that's in those levels. Now we're going to adjust this as we go along. It's important to mention with Learners Toolkit, we really are at the very early stages here, and it's a relatively small project at the moment, but we have great hopes for the potential for it. And what we're going to be doing after Christmas is get this pilot that I'm about to show you actually out there and get some students telling us, do these characters work? Do they make sense to you in terms of finding things? That kind of idea. Okay, so now I'm going to try something and move on to Learners Toolkit itself. For now, what I'll say, is there any questions? Because that's the presentation side of things over before I go on to actually showing you the toolkit itself.
Hamish, I was just going to say there that in the chat pane there were some of us are having a conversation about sort of different people's needs. Peter mentioned there that our mature students' needs different. I mean, from a personal point of view, a lot of my mature students will tell me that they don't think they'll be able to keep up with the younger ones and things like that. And Julian's mentioned there that we must avoid stereotyping younger students as tech-savvy and older ones as technophobic. I quite like that one. Thanks for that, Julian. And Ruth shared a link with us there as well, so the links will be available on the training community as well as in the recording there.
Like, it's really, really hard, and I don't think it's possible to come up with sort of categorizations that will make sense in every situation. Like within assistive technology, I see every age group, every ability you can possibly imagine, and on top of that, additional difficulties as well. But I know this group's talked an awful lot about digital literacy and things, because Ian Cameron, who's my line manager by the way, he sort of said it's a topic that comes up. But I think what we've tried to do with the separating Tom, Sara and Zack, maybe they are sort of geared towards the young, I don't know. But we're trying to find some kind of way to get people to relate to them in such a way that it's not saying, are you rubbish at technology and totally university kind of thing. It's hard to put a positive spin on it, but the digital literacy thing kind of is what we're hitting at, and that's ignoring age. And it's not can you use a computer, it's can you use a computer in an academic setting. So, you know, you might have, sorry.
Yeah, Julian's just said there, is it more about their study experience? I mean, I tend to find that a person's own perception of their ability is totally different of what I would say they were capable of in sort of like a using Word capability. Somebody will come on my course and say, yeah, I'm really good at Word, I've been using it for 15 years, and I don't think there's very much that you can teach me today. And they go away and they're absolutely blown away by the fact that they didn't know that Word could do all this stuff. So it's getting people to understand what things are capable of doing. You know, as I say, that their own perception of what they're capable of is completely different, and that's a battle sometimes. Is getting people to realise, you know, how good they are at things. Confidence is a key. Julian said there. Peter's, yeah, it's an interesting conversation which we could probably talk about all day and still come up with lots of different ideas, but it's very interesting. I'll shut up now, so I'll turn my mic off. We can, Hamish. Yep, we can see your internet window there. And for all the participants, you may have got a message that popped up at the right-hand side to tell you that you can experience this better using full screen. It's entirely up to you if you want to do that or not.
It's just to sort of close up from my point of view. You get to, like, if you take two different kinds of example, I'll get a lot of mature students, and in a way, they might have a good advantage in that they know or are honest when they don't know what they're doing. They may be a little more confident about saying, I don't know what I'm doing with technology. And then that's probably more a problem of confidence in the end, and you just need to build up their confidence. But then you'll sort of flip the other side, and I'll find some younger students who have lots and lots of confidence and think, I don't need to learn any of this because I can use technology. I've been using an iPhone forever. I've got tablets coming at my ears, that kind of thing. But they have no idea how to use it for studying. because it's a completely different thing. It's back to the example, just take a simple pen. Just because you can write and use a pen doesn't mean you can write an essay. So often it's communication to the more confident students that, yeah, you may be confident, but is it the right kind of confidence? And to the more mature students, say, that maybe don't have as much confidence, is saying, well, you know, it's good that you're recognizing it's a problem, but you need to just get in there and build your confidence to do it. And there's this tipping point, it's a balance. But yeah, it's almost like we need to come up with a term that mixes academic skills with technology skills. I don't know, anyone who wants to come up with some interesting blended words, that'd be grand. Right, I will move on and attempt to, where have I put Learners Toolkit? Now, I take it I need to do that. And bring up this one. Okay, can I just check, can people now see the Learners Toolkit in our Blackboard VLE? Okay, now I'll just talk you through the basics of this. This really is a very early stage thing. We're in the middle of what we've called phase 1, and that's simply about getting what resources we can together, presenting them in our virtual learning environment in such a way that allows us to play with look and feel, the UI, the navigation, that kind of thing. And then after Christmas and the New Year, we'll be getting into focus groups and that kind of thing, and adding more resources. So to start with, yes, we've put it on our VLE, which is Blackboard. We've had some struggles with Blackboard. Blackboard's not the most flexible of VLEs. I came from Robert Gordon before I came to Aberdeen University, and they had Moodle, and it's an interesting contrast between the flexibility you have between the two, which one I'd prefer, but I'm sure everybody has their own preferences in these matters. Now, what we've done is try to create an area that's visually striking and visually different. Now, I should say the reason why we chose the VLE to use it, to host it, and we did flip between whether we wanted to do this or put it on our general website, was simply down to the case of where do students go? What do students look at every day? Now, thanks to things like Camtasia, and thanks to things like this is where students download their PowerPoint slides, download their course resources, the VLE is where they see. Not rhymed, my apologies for that. So we've put it in there, and the idea eventually, and we'll play with how it works, is this may be assigned to a student as a course, to every student as a course. We may be able to customize what they see and have different courses for international students, say postgraduate students, that kind of idea. But the VLE gives us the long-term flexibility as well as the presence for students. So our homepage, as you can see, is instantly put into our different categories, so to speak, our different characters. Now there's also, down the bottom, an ability to go into a database of everything that's on the site. But otherwise, people immediately recognize these three things. Now, to speak about the look and feel, first of all, I should have introduced earlier, there's somebody in the chat, a room you'll see called Z, Alison. Now, she was somebody we actually, a part of the funding we got for this, managed to fund her post. Now, she was brought in because of her skills in digital design. So she's very much responsible for just how pretty this all looks. I can't possibly take any credit for that, because if I'd made it look horrible, I can assure you. So what Z's done here is made sure that there's these little icons here for Tom, Sara and Zack, and that there's a colour scheme for each of them. Now, this is in a way sort of basic good design principles, but it's something we felt very strongly about getting it just right and keeping it simple. So we've got our 3 colour bands. As you go into each of the people one at a time, you're presented with more icons representing the kind of materials that are here. Now again, we have very few resources up here at the moment, and I'll just show you a few bits and pieces. We've done things like having a difference between, you see the stacked icons with the wireless, stacked icons for the wireless thing to show if there's a submenu within there or something to just go straight. So we'll go into the wireless connections. There's a million ways to connect to wireless now. So if we go into here, I'll click on the Android one. Now, every one of our resources at the when you get into a resource page, they're all done in exactly the same way. So they start off with a question. The title we've tried to do is always going to be a question. It's always going to be a natural language title. Now again, we're going to try this out, see if it works, but we wanted something that draws people in based on what they're trying to achieve with that. And every one of these resources is split very roughly into 3 sections. We have a quick start section with a cartoon, hand-drawn by our very capable Z. And the idea with the quick start section, this was kind of based on an idea to do with IKEA flat packs. It was the idea that in an IKEA flat pack, it assumes you know how to use a screwdriver, it assumes you know how to use a hammer, etc. So all it does is gives you the base of putting stuff together. It's once again
Hamish, whilst you're bringing that word
switch on their phone in this example. Who know
yep, sorry Hamish. I was just going to mention there, whilst we're waiting for that document to display, Steve has asked about will you be capturing any stats on how the different sections are being used?
What do I need to type in terms of the username format, that kind of thing, connect. So this is for the people who need the bare minimum very quick. Now the walkthrough, I won't play this all one, I'll just show you very quickly as not going to happen. There you go. Now to skip through a bit into that is basically a screenshot, and it goes through somebody on their phone connecting to Wi-Fi. So the walkthrough idea is for the step above, the step beyond somebody needing something really simple. This is for somebody needing just a little bit more. And then finally in the detailed guides, and there'll be lots of resources appear here depending on the specific area, but that's where you get to your complete and total worksheets explaining absolutely every detail of how to connect to it. Now that's just the Wi-Fi side of things. Let's go down to what can we use now? Let's use the Word one. Now to give you an example, this is obviously more complex using Word, but this is based on our basic introduction to Word guide that the training and documentation team produced. Now we've got, once again, a really basic how-to in terms of the quick start, a video to go with it, and the detailed guides. So it's the idea that this is a consistent theme throughout. Now I'm going to go back home and go into something a little bit more complicated because we're going to step up our level to Sara. So the Tom section, as I'd said, that's for people who are just needing the basics. Now the kind of basics we want to include in there in the future is e-registration, for example. How do I e-register? All of those kind of things are basically, here I'm at university, I've just started, what do I need to learn? What tools are out there for me, and how do I make use of them initially? Excuse me. Now the intermediate one, Sara's tool. So once again, we're keeping the same color scheme and idea, so but using little keys like color to know where you are at every time. Now, and here the kind of resources you start to get are the slightly more complicated ones. Now, for example, we're going to be writing an Evernote one. Now, Evernote's not something for somebody who's just looking for the basic. Evernote's something for somebody who's already got the idea of note-taking on a computer and is maybe now going, right, what better tools can I use to capture my information, to take grasp of everything and put it all together? Evernote's great for that, and it's for the people who are ready to start moving on to that. Mind Managers are mind mapping software. And this one's kind of a good example of going a little bit further in terms of complexity of what we've got. So I'm going to click on the essay writing one. Oh no, the essay writing one's not there. I'll go into the introduction one. So this again, we've got our natural language kind of question, how do I mind map on a computer? Quick Start Guide shows the very basics. People know about mind mapping generally, they have an idea of what it is. And this is just a quick start on how to load Mind Manager and get to the point of being able to create mind maps on the computer. This is just our license, allows all of our students to have access to Mind Manager, students and staff on their own personal computer. So it's quite a good license for that. The walkthrough, I kind of to show you the walkthrough. I'll put it on. I'm not sure if you can hear the audio for this. I can't see any chat to see whether you can hear the audio or not. I'm going to leave that running for a bit and skip through. Basically, it takes you through the how to download it, that kind of thing, how to get it, how to put in your license key and so on. And then ending in creating the same mind map but on a computer point of view. So that's an example of something slightly more complicated than connecting to Wi-Fi. Following the same pattern as a quick start for people who are just quite happy just being given the raw information, something for people who need a little bit more. And then if we, actually I won't open that up because I'll have to share a different screen, but those are our resources that you can get which will take you through the detailed sort of steps in there. So that's the very basics of the Learners Toolkit at present. Ultimately, in the Zack side of things, that's when we start getting even more complicated. So yes, there's things like Evernote again and Mind Manager, but what they're going to be is things like using Mind Manager for project management, using Gantt charts, connecting to databases, using the various advanced techniques for using audio note taker and all of that kind of thing. That's where you get into the, possibly almost you could say it's for the postgraduate students who just need to deal with an enormous workload, enormously complex information, all of that kind of idea. And we'll go back to the home page. Now there's one last thing I'm going to show you, so I'm going to stop sharing this right now, and I want to show you one of the resources in the Word document form. If I can find the right one. Actually, is there any question? Yeah, we're trying to work out the best way to actually do that, because there was mention of using Google Analytics and stuff, but this isn't something I'm doing because that's not my area of expertise. Because I know Blackboard can do certain stats and things, but we are looking for tools of trying to find out how people are using it, that kind of idea. Because obviously, like, we want to pay attention to how quickly people find the right resources. Are people actually able to just browse through them? And if they're browsing through them, are they lingering long enough to take it in? So yeah, very much we want to pay attention to that kind of thing as much as we can. Okay, were there any more questions before I move on to a specific resource? Okay, right, I'm going to assume that's a no because I'm not hearing anything there. And yes, I should have said, I mentioned before, Z's actually in the chat, and I can already see she's answering some of your questions. So yeah, if you're wanting questions about the more technical side of these things, then she's a good person to ask in that case. Right, let's go back to... let's go back to this now. I'm going to open up a shared Word document that I've got here, just to speak through the specific resources, because it's not just about the layout and things. We're wanting to change the way we do resources as well. Let me just find the right one. Right. My apologies while I click around and find this. Right, there we go. Right, hopefully everybody can see that. I'll just assume that you can. Okay. Now, this is a typical example of the sort of downloadable resources here. Now, as you can see, it follows the same visual style. The whole idea about whatever resources are up here is everything starts to be linked. We want the visual style, once it's thoroughly approved and been tested, to go across the board with all of the resources. If there are workshops that go with these things, if there are drop-in times or anything like that that go with these kind of resources, we want it to look and feel the same way. It's all about branding, really. Now, I won't go into too much detail about this, but this resource combines how to use Mind Manager, but also some study skills as well. I've been working with our dyslexia tutor on writing this resource, and she's had a lot of input into this. So the document itself and the videos that are accompanying it cover the start with what is planning with mind mapping and essay writing, how does mind mapping help your essay write, that kind of thing. So
Z's actually been answering quite a lot of the questions that were coming up, so thanks very much, Z.
It's covering how to do this,
you'll probably find that there's lots of things that you could have answered earlier on in the session, but it's difficult to keep up with the chat, as you say. But Z's been doing a great job there. But that's the toolkit sounds absolutely fantastic, and we all want to know, how do we get access to it?
But essentially, we want to work our way towards some kind of, it's not quite a digital textbook, although that would be the ideal, having a digital resource that combines both writing, and we're going to play around with that to get it right. We kind of wanted this in PDFs, but PDFs don't seem to handle YouTube very well, which is a bit of a pain. So the idea is a person can go through this detailed resource that combines with the video that will be embedded in the site as well, and also links to everything else that's related to it. So in a way, these things are linked together. So a person.
It is difficult because obviously, you create something on behalf of the university, and the university wants to keep hold of it. I mean, I have resources in the VLE at Leeds, but it's just. Whenever I have time to do it, because the majority of my time I'm in the classroom, so the VLE sort of gets put on the back burner whilst I'm delivering training courses, and there's only me that does it, because we're a very small team. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, right. Now, I was going to speak about the future of resources, but I've already spoken about that. But basically, that's where our project is at the moment. We have a functional prototype. Now, I've said the hopes and aims for that prototype, the aims for the project itself. And then after Christmas, we're going to start going into phase 2, which is getting actual human beings to play around with it. We'll have enough resources by then for people to actually get some use out of it. Being in assistive technology, well,
I can see that multiple attendees are typing in the chat pod, so I think that might be generating a few more questions or comments or thoughts in there. So we'll let everybody type things in there. But Julian's asked, what about commercial equivalents? Did you consider those?
Ultimately, at the moment, our fund project's limited, so we're wanting this project, this prototype idea, is to get the right kind of feedback, the feedback we want, which is saying, yes, students want this, yes, students find this useful, and then we can hopefully extend it. Now, the phase 3, after we've gotten some more feedback and in a way working alongside, is we've already been speaking to the library, we've been speaking to our student learning service, that kind of thing, and we're wanting to get some resources that are both directly from individual departments but also co-written with them, and prove the concept that we can have one singular resource as far as students are concerned, or singular area as far as students are concerned, that brings in all of these different kinds of elements. Now, the long-term future of this project, should it be approved, I suppose I've got kind of a utopian point of view about it. I would love to have this area develop further and further. and it become this sort of self-generating thing. One really big idea that we're not able to implement at the moment, but will be as soon as we can, is we want to have an area for students to put in their own tools. Now, this whole idea of the toolkit, I haven't really emphasized it, but it is, we are wanting sort of people to find a way of looking at this and going through it all and finding the bits and pieces that are useful to them, the bits and pieces that they can use and put in their own toolkit. But if we have some kind of forum ability, we want to encourage
Rebecca's just mentioned there. I was going to ask you actually, Rebecca, about that. She has an open website that she and a colleague run and maintain, and she's put a link to it there, so you can go and have a look at it. Rebecca, did you do your presentation on that at the event in February?
Rewards for it in some way. Maybe it's just the person being.
Yes, I thought it was. Yes.
We would support them in producing those resources, ideally.
Okay,
so
now,
it just becomes this self-generating sort of
the thing is, what I will do is at the end of the session I will go through the chat, and any links anybody has provided, I'll just stick them all together and put them on the training community so that people have got access to them. And I'll also ask you, Sara, to put them on the website as well, along with the link to the recording.
The idea would be that maybe somebody like IT services, whoever hosts it, I
can see most people have
but there's this
finished typing in the chat pod there.
It's maintained properly, and in Learners Toolkits, both for academic staff and students over here, and there's some kind of proper feedback mechanism. Again, it's sort of you can see what I'm meaning with this, but if we produce this sort of cyclic idea where we've got the customers, so to speak, on one side, feeding through a committee, going back into the strategy, and then feeding back into the Learners Toolkit, this area becomes something that generates more and more use, more and more value for the users and the university itself. But that is the long-term kind of future. And then we'll move on to any questions, discussions, thoughts, that kind of idea. It's kind of hard to keep up with all of the chat on this. So Jane, if you've picked up on any specific questions, would be useful. We have to come to some kind of arrangements. I would like something like this to be partially open. I'm sure I share the same sentiments as people here. I don't believe resources like these should be walled off in a way, because it'd be great to generate these kind of communities of people sharing these ideas and inputting their own sort of ideas into it. Still scanning through the emails.
It does look fantastic, the resource. It looks excellent, really easy to use, and well done. I can see multiple attendees are typing in the chat pod there again, so we might be getting a few more comments or questions in there. Okay, so Julian's asking, is there an appetite for collaborating with other universities?
The growth of technology available, the use of that technology in demand, and then you look at the university's ability to support it. Like, it's not in my role to do this. It's not in the role of the training and documentation team to an extent to do this, because that's as I mentioned, they're the other people within IT services. They're mainly staff facing. But we're just trying to get something done and something out there that can hopefully become self-generating. So yeah, like I should have said at the very start, I'm fully aware that everybody out there must be trying these kind of self-saving things. This is just our attempt at doing it, our attempt at getting something shifted.
It seems like a lot of people like the cartoon instructions. You know, the out-of-the-box ones, I think they work quite well. I think somebody did mention earlier on in the chat that they'd never seen anything like that before.
Ooh, I probably reveal some kind of prejudice. I don't like off-the-shelf kind of things, but it's maybe from an assistive technology point of view. Right, yeah, put it this way. From my point of view in assistive technology, students get funding for buying the technology and the training they receive with it. And there are DSA suppliers who will provide that training. And we've looked into that, the off-the-shelf type training, both in terms of one-to-one training, and they also do online kind of stuff. I've never ever liked it, because we're going back to the question, we're not teaching to the tool, we're teaching to the person in their context, and their context basically. I don't believe in teaching technology that's not also teaching what you're using it for. So essay writing should go hand in hand with teaching Word. Hand in hand with mind mapping, if that's what's useful to you, and that kind of thing. So yeah, there are all sorts of things like I want to call it James, lynda.com. There's that kind of thing that's available.
Okay, I'm just reading through the chat there, see if anything else is coming up.
Have impressed me enough. I like the idea of it being organic. I like the idea of it being generated by the people who know the students and know what the students are trying to achieve. I'm immediately off and pasting that link in.
I know there's people still typing in chat there, but I am conscious that it is after 12. I think we scheduled it to run till about 12:30, but I can see some people leaving there. So it might be quite a nice idea if we just wrap up there, Hamish. Is that okay with you? Yep. Okay, well, for the people who are still here, we will continue this conversation on the training community. Julian asked about can we have a contact list there, but if you visit the training community, we will start something on there just to continue this conversation and see what ideas people come up with. And again, we will email you with a link to everything, and it might be easier if you go to the training community, to be fair. But before you all go, I would like to just bring up a couple of the polls just to get some feedback from you about what you thought about the session today. I found it extremely interesting, so thank you for that, Hamish. And I am going to bring up some polls. There's just 3 questions that we would like you to complete there.
And doing something new. None of us have
and you won't be able to see what everybody else is responding there, so it's just to give us an idea about what you thought about today.
It's very hard to find the time to step back and do something bigger and doing something.
You do.
Using the initiative to get a bit further. Now, the reason why, with the funding we did manage to get, was to create the post for Z, is because the key thing that we found was missing.
Oh, just seeing that Steve's put something in chat there about a website, which is quite a nice tool for creating animated cartoon type things. Not free, but pretty cheap if anyone is interested in. Thank you for that, Steve.
Assistive Technology and the training and documentation team, and turn it into this kind of resource. It's kind of like she's an enabler, I suppose. She's the person who can't like at the moment we're having our exams at the moment, and I'm having an awful lot of trouble trying to do anything but focus on exams, and that's right, that's what we should do. But that same kind of interruption comes up constantly, whereas Z can't be interrupted by that because her job is simply to make this stuff work, to make it look nice, to make it flow, to put our ideas out there and contribute ideas around.
I like your thinking, Hamish.
Getting this project even vaguely off the ground after years of thinking about it.
Okay, well, it looks like I'm sorry, I missed that, Hamish. Sorry, I was talking over you then. I do apologise. Okay, now it looks like most people have completed the polls for us there, so I will just hide those for the moment. and I am conscious of the time there, and that maybe people do need to leave and don't want to stay till 12:30. But we will stay online for a little bit longer for those of you who want to continue the chat. But I would like to thank everybody for attending today.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Hamish for his excellent presentation, and for all the participation with the chat and the links that you've provided with us. I've really enjoyed the session today, so thank you very much, and we hope to see you all on the next webinar. We will tell you or let you know when that is going to be, and what the content will be as well. And as I say, just keep visiting the UCISA website and also the training community, because we will be posting lots of information on there about what's been discussed today.
We spend an awful lot of time trying to show
now, if you need to leave the meeting, all you need to do is just close out of the window, because you've not logged in with any of your university credentials. You can just close the window, and thank you very much. Thank you, Ian, no problem. Okay, so I can see everybody gradually disappearing there. Gillian, you're still online. Is there anything you wanted to say, or we're just hanging around?